Hello, hello, hello. It's good to see you all. Thank you for joining me here on this, at least here in New Hampshire, hot and muggy Friday afternoon. We're going to be talking about using AI in your business. Um, First, let me pull up my notes here. Um, if you are joining us, go ahead and drop a comment in the chat to tell me where you are joining us from. I know I've got some people here in the United States. There might be some on the West Coast. There might be some outside the US too. I'd love to hear, to see where y'all are coming from and to hear your take on what the heck is going on with AI and how we can start using it in our business, or maybe what we're doing anyway already in our business using AI. So when I was thinking, there we go. When I was thinking about a topic for, hey there's Michelle from New York City. It's so good to see you, Michelle. When I was thinking about the topic to talk about this week, at least here in the United States, we're at the very end of July 2023. If you're catching this on replay, one of the biggest stories right now is the strike going on in Hollywood. The actors and the writers unions are striking. And one of the sticking points actually is the studios they do want to use AI, right? I don't know about you, but when I think about artificial intelligence or AI, putting that together with Hollywood wasn't one of the things that really just automatically went together for me. I really didn't think of that pairing. But the more you think about it, the more it makes a lot of sense, because what do the studios want to do, right? What they want to be able to do is always cut costs so they can improve revenue, improve profit, right? Like any business, fair enough. But what they want to do, at least the fear, is that they want to have these AI models and train them on the artists' words and images, and then just generate new content without compensating the original human creators. And so when we start to think about AI, we can start to think about, in my mind, it's like a lot of things in technology. Technology, and we're talking very broadly here, lets us do a whole lot of things that we weren't able to do prior. Whether we should be doing those things, that's a different question. And a lot of times that's the question that doesn't get addressed. And so I think today I wanted to start kind of addressing that. And spoiler alert, this is a ginormous topic. And so there are no definitive answers. There's no way in 20, 30 minutes we could cover everything about AI. But I wanted to start thinking a little bit about, really on the ground, what is it really looking like? What are the realistic implications for our businesses, or depending on what kind of business you're in, for our clients and their businesses, right? And what should we be, as ethical business professionals, or even ethical human beings, right? What are some of the things that we need to be keeping an eye out for, and so that we can mitigate any of these risks? Because that's another thing that we all know with technology, any kind of technology, there's always risks. There's always risks involved. And so we want to try and mitigate those to the best extent we can. So, also when I was doing, some research for this today, this discussion, broadly speaking, there are two camps of people when they talk about or write about AI. Either one camp is it's the best thing ever, right? And it's going to allow humanity to grow by leaps and bounds, right? Or there's another camp that says, oh my God, robots are going to take over the world. And they've even coined a phrase for this, the Terminator scenario. So referencing back to the popular movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, The Terminator, right? Like most things, it's a little bit of both at this point. And to be fair, we're still moving through this and living through it. And if there's one thing that humans are, one of our gifts, it's being adaptable and being able to change. So, thinking about AI, the one thing is, if you have a smartphone, right, and you have it password protected or facial image protected, right? So it can only, all it needs to do to open is scan your face, right? That's AI. That's artificial intelligence. That's a kind of computer vision, right? A lot of things about AI are very detailed. We are not going to get in the weeds, but think about AI in a lot of ways as looking for patterns. At the root of computer vision, what they call it, right? Being able to unlock our smartphones just by pointing it at our face is because the computer within your phone, I know, isn't that crazy? The computer within your phone, the software is using pattern recognition algorithms, right? Think about radiologists examining x-rays. There's a lot going on in the healthcare field, right, with medical professionals where they have algorithms that read through x-rays. Again, that's pattern recognition. Same thing with the kind of work that I do, which falls more on the machine learning side and the statistics side of AI, right, which is figuring out patterns in the data, patterns or trends, right? And using tools like regression analysis, multivariate regression, cluster analysis, those sorts of things to find correlations and to find trends and patterns, and then see about predicting into the future, predicting behaviors, predicting likely profitability scenarios, that sort of thing, which is one of the things I do with my clients. But even that is pretty broad. So let's focus in just a little bit on just a few of these for now, right? Let's think about machine learning, right? Predictions and patterns, and then something like ChatGPT. It would be nice if I could talk today, huh? I'm sorry. ChatGPT, which is, again, a kind of AI called generative AI, right? Where it's not simply looking to find a pattern, detect a pattern. It's actually generating something, right? So generative AI. So if we are thinking about this, I want to show you, I asked my LinkedIn connections, and granted, this was a very unscientific sample, okay? But what I did is I asked them, and now why is it not letting me? There we go. Let me share my screen here real quick, just so you can see. So what I did is I looked, and I'll make this a little bigger for y'all. I asked, what kinds of AI are you using right now, just day to day in your business day? And we got a really nice split that really follows a lot of a lot of what you're seeing in the literature. The one thing that surprised me is that there was no one who chose predicting customer demand. So that predictive part of machine learning and AI, I thought there would be some of that in here, but there wasn't. Again, unscientific sample, right? But we have a 40-40-20 split. So we've got 40% writing, right? Like blogs, writing copy, writing newsletters, that sort of thing. 40% something else, and 20% automating repetitive tasks. So I thought that was really interesting because at least as I was looking at the literature, these are some of the things that AI is most used for, right? Creating content, automating tasks, and then something completely different, which is something we just absolutely might not have even thought of. In this case, for example, one of the people who said something completely different actually uses it for travel itineraries. And she explained a little bit more. She said, well, if I'm going to a city and I've got a couple of days there, she goes into ChatGPT and says, I have 3 days in Albuquerque, New Mexico, let's say. What are the best things to do? So I thought that was pretty smart. That was something I hadn't even thought of. So again, I still think that this is such a new tool, and there's so much hype about it. It's not even a year old yet. At least this iteration of ChatGPT isn't even a year old yet. We don't even know what is going to come of this. Think about the very early days of the internet. No one thought it would morph and grow into what it is today. No one did. No one had any idea. So kind of untangling AI in business, I think there are a couple of things that are the most useful and that you might be finding yourself looking at doing on a more or less day-to-day basis. Automating tasks. Again, that's something that was in the poll. It was in the literature also. And I think that's one of the first things that comes to mind when we think about this. Think about counting inventory. Think about even in customer service. Think about responding to rote questions on your website. So there's little chat bots that come up, right? They can be pre-programmed. They can automate that part of a customer's questions so that a real life human doesn't have to answer the easier ones or the more straightforward questions, and they can use their brain power answering the more technical ones or the more tangled up ones, right? So automating tasks, definitely. Handling large data. And now this one is very interesting because this is especially where the work that I do starts to really play in. So I have kind of a vested interest in this, just a little. Handling large data, especially when we're talking about big data, especially when we're talking about how cheap data storage is these days, and just how much data about our everyday life and our interactions they're being saved somewhere. They're being saved undoubtedly in multiple places by multiple actors, right? So when you think about having to analyze that, then definitely something like AI is a great idea to be able to cut that down. So one example that I found was in the accounting industry. So auditors, when they come and do an audit, they'll sample. And I'm sure you've been part of these. I certainly have, oh, can you go find this document from this date that shows this? They're sampling. They're making sure that the books are really in order, that there's enough backup and documentation for everything that a firm purports happened in the past year with regard to their finances. Now that algorithms can handle scans of data, as long as it's electronic, and that's a big if, because there are a lot of firms still where it's not. Auditors don't have to do that sampling anymore. They can actually just ingest all of the data, the financial data, whatever they need for the past year, whatever year they're doing the audit for. And the algorithms can crunch it. Now that's great because, sampling is great, but sampling is a sample. It's a representation of the whole. It's not the whole, right? So in that sense, that frees up the time of the auditors to not have to do that sampling. Instead, anything that comes out as looking like an outlier, anything that is suspicious, something like that, they can focus, the auditors, the humans can focus on that and let kind of the grunt work be handled by the AI. That's pretty good. Can also think about during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, threw a complete wrench into supply chains all around the world. So being able to model these ripple effects across the globe of factories being shut down, the container ships just stranded outside of outside of Long Beach, California, right? The port of Los Angeles, right? Being able to model that sort of thing is extremely complex. And having algorithms to help you with that can certainly cut down that time. Think about climate change and being able to model the weather and what if scenarios with the weather, right? So these models are good. They're really good at crunching the numbers, lots of numbers, picking out trends, and then making predictions going forward. And I say that with a smile on my face because the predictions are only as good as the historical data. They're just based on the historical data. So that's one of the places where people using AI and these algorithms really need to be careful because the models have been trained, right? Taught, informed, coached. The models have been trained on historical data. So if you project out, the assumption is that the future is going to be like the past, right? That ain't necessarily a valid assumption. Who could have predicted the pandemic? Who could have predicted the fall of the Berlin Wall? No one did in either of those. So just because you've got a boatload of data from the past and you're able to predict something doesn't necessarily mean you should. And the way that the algorithms are structured right now, all that we've told them to do is give us a prediction based on this set of facts, this discrete set of facts, this history. It's doing what we asked it to do. We're assuming more than what we should be assuming. The other tricky part about AI is when we've got these algorithms and the algorithms themselves is kind of an offshoot of what I was just talking about before, the historical data. Projections can only be as good as the historical data, right? What about if there is bias in your data that you're using to train your algorithm? Then what's going to happen? Well, if there was bias before, it's going to predict out bias. It's going to spit out results that incorporate that same bias. Because again, what we've told it is this is how the world works, right? And predict out a similar way based on this. This is the problem with, for example, mortgage lending decisions. So in the banking and finance industry, a lot of times there is a lot of regulation around this, and rightly so. Because if there has been bias in mortgage lending in the past, which here in the United States, it's well documented that there has been and continues to be. So if you're going to try to model out and predict out anything about mortgage lending going into the future using biased data, you're going to be predicting that bias out into the future. So that's one of the things that practitioners really need to be aware of and keep an eye out for. And that kind of gets into also the whole idea of the biases that we don't even realize we have. And what could those be? How could those be affecting the kinds of data that we collect and the actual collection of that data? I think that's getting a little in the weeds, and I think we will talk about that in a future conversation. Algorithmic bias. I've got a few words to say on that. You might be able to tell. But the other thing that really concerns me and concerns others is a lot of times what happens is these models find correlations. They find that certain things are related to each other with a high degree of probability, let's say. Trying not to use terribly technical language here. But again, correlation does not equal causation. That's one of the things that was hammered into me when I was a very young graduate student. And it's one that I hammer into my students when I teach this. Let me share my screen again. Correlation does not equal causation. There's this gentleman named Tyler Vigen, Vigen, and he has a website called Spurious Correlations. I will, you can see down here, Tyler Vigen, Vigen.com. I'll put a link in the show notes after this. But all of these correlations that, hey, they're correlations. I mean, look at this correlation, a correlation of 95%. His R is 0.958. Again, just that's highly correlated. What is it correlating? Per capita consumption of mozzarella cheese with how many civil engineering doctorates were awarded. Now, come on, what do those have to do with each other? They don't have anything to do with each other, right? But they're highly correlated. So what? And that's the question. What kind of decisions do you make based on something like this? And this is exactly where are you not flipping? There we go. That is the scary part of the kinds of algorithms that deal with coming up with predicting a risk factor or something. They find tons of correlations, and they assume that a correlation means it causes something, right? They just assume a straight path. That's not what correlation does, but they go ahead and do it. That's an extremely scary type of bias. And especially, so, hopefully you can see if you're making decisions based on this, extremely dangerous, extremely dangerous. It can really lead you down the wrong track. So say a couple more words and then we will wrap up today. What does this mean for one of the things that inevitably conversations that I've seen and that I've been part of about AI in business veer into the realm of humans being replaced, right? Being replaced by the algorithms, being replaced by robots, being replaced. Very valid fear. These algorithms are quite powerful. They can do a lot of things that humans can't, or that would take humans quite a long time to do. A couple of the jobs that are purportedly most at risk at being taken over by algorithms like this are things like kind of what I do, coders, right? GitHub just released in the past week or so, basically a chat GPT for writing code, writing R code, writing all kinds of code, right? Data analysis, like I talked about before, being able to ingest big data sets and find patterns and all, recognize trends, that sort of thing. Those kind of data analysts, those, according to the literature, are likely to be replaced. Copywriters, not a surprise that they would rise to the top as one profession pretty vulnerable, because that's basically what a lot of people are using ChatGPT to do, right? To copyright for them. And then lawyers, because there's a lot of what goes into a lawyer's job that can be sped up, can be replaced by these algorithms. Think about going through contracts, looking for specific clauses. Think about doing legal research, going through case after case after case, looking for precedent, right? Looking for certain situations or certain types of judgments or something. Basically, from what I've been seeing, it's white collar workers that are supposedly most at risk. So people like me, maybe people like you. I don't think all is lost. I'd love to hear what you all think about this. I think that there's still quite a need for that creative spark and ingenuity that we have by virtue of being human. And after all, we're the ones who built this technology. I think that says a lot for our ability to adapt and be intelligent and be even more intelligent. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to cut it off here. It's about 3:30. If you have comments, I'd love to hear them. Feedback, always welcome. This was definitely an overview kind of thing with some examples. This is such a large topic. I'd love to know if you all would appreciate having some more conversations on this. I certainly wouldn't mind doing a little more research on some of these aspects in particular, but I'd really love to hear what you all have to say. How are you using this in your day-to-day? Are you one of the people who's worried about potentially becoming irrelevant? Do you feel like you're vulnerable? Or are you team humanity like I am, thinking that, no, actually, we are probably going to end up surprising ourselves with this? I see Star here. Thank you. You're most welcome. Thanks, Star. Thanks for coming by. And with that, I will go ahead and sign off. And until next week, go forth and analyze.